possibly can. And we'll also pass around our sign-in sheet, and this is really only for first-time attendees. If you're getting our emails, don't sign your name. If you're not on our email list, please give us your name and, most important, a legible email address. So we'll pass that around. Hopefully Josie brought some pens. Because,
Sure I did.
those are great pens.
She's got pen lady.
And
You not prepared, Doug? Come on now.
isn't it?
What do we know? Josie has 10.
Okay, a couple of quick items here that I want to talk about real quickly is, for those of you who don't know, the board authorized this group to officially put into the city a claim to get back the taxpayer money that Steve Soiker, Councilman Steve Soiker, was paid as a subsidy for his cell phone over the last several years, $7,500 worth of subsidy. And it was based on the fact that the city administrative policy specifically states that those subsidies are only for personal cell phone use. So we did file that claim with the city, and as you have to before you initiate any kind of a legal action, even if you get rear-ended by a cop car, you still have to put a claim in first. The city attorney called me and told me that Marge Baxter called and said she was afraid that if she ruled on it, it would be looked at as conflict of interest. So the city went to the expense of sending it to an outside attorney firm to turn it down, and I kind of chuckled at that, saying, Marge, we didn't expect you to approve it. We just wanted you to quickly deny it so we could go ahead and file a suit, which is going to be the next case. I found out just today that they have raised the small claims limits to, I believe, either $7,500 or $10,000. So we can go ahead and small claims and file that suit. And basically, it's to not give us anything as a Tea Party. It's to give it back, this money, to the general fund of the city. It's taxpayer money. Shouldn't have been paid in the first place, in our opinion. And we're asking that the city collect it back from Mr. Soiker and put it back in the city's coffers. So that's announcement number one. Announcement number two is basically a little information about what they call bullet voting. And it's very important in this kind of an election at the local level that folks understand what bullet voting is all about. Let me just read this to you. Bullet voting is when a voter votes for just one candidate despite having the option to vote for more than one due to a voting system such as at-large elections, where there are more than one position to be filled. A voter helps his or her preferred candidate by not supplying votes to potential rivals. This strategy is proven to be beneficial in city council and school board elections, where the top one or two or three receiving candidates gain a seat and are elected. If you have a strong favorite and are just okay with a second or third choice, by giving those less than favorite candidates your vote, you may be adding enough votes to their total to actually place them higher than your top choice. Polls have proven that the also-ran not top-notch candidates in tight races have actually received enough second-choice votes to garner the most total votes. All indications show that this city council and school board races are going to be very close. So my recommendation is bullet vote for your favorite top-notch candidate. And I can tell you again who we've endorsed for the three races here. For the Park District, Elaine Freeman and Kate O'Brien. For the school board, Josie Hirsch. That's a critical one, bullet vote there. And for the council, Keith Mashburn, don't allow your second choice, don't allow you to think that you're wasting a vote by doing this, and it's done off. And I'll pass these around. There's a few copies.
First, explain that, layman terms. Are you saying don't make the second vote?
Don't give a second choice candidate your vote, because that may end up putting them ahead of you. Well, I thought I just did. Does everybody understand? Pass these around and take them. Take a copy. If I wasn't succinct enough.
Last time I heard of that.
Yeah, you know, the rest of you guys are Einsteins. I'm not, so I didn't catch it.
Okay. That's all the announcements that I have. Are there any announcements from the membership with regard to any activities, things going on? Frank, you got anything for Keith or anything?
No, nothing right now. You just
Okay.
couldn't be here today, I'm sorry.
So if there are no member announcements, let me just get right into the program for tonight. I was expecting two other people that have been involved in this to be here. They were both unable to come, but let me just tell you the sequence of how this, what we'll call Tapo Gate, occurred. Some time ago, the city initiated a Tapo Street redevelopment Fascade improvement project to clean up, fix up, paint up the businesses on Old Tapo Street in Simi Valley. The redevelopment agency also did some city improvements, fancy street lights and a nice median and etc. And I can't say that the effort was not well-intentioned. It was probably well-intentioned at the time to try and draw new tenants and new businesses to Old Tapo Street to invigorate the economy. But what happened subsequent to that, and again, it was called the Tapo Street Fascade Redevelopment Project.
Facade.
Fascade facade. In any event, the definition of that word is the frontal view, the outside of a building. And that's what the guidelines called for, is city funds for places to clean up, paint up, fix up, make the exterior fronts of their building more attractive to both potential tenants and shoppers. Mission Burrito, for instance, redid their exterior front. They also wanted to add a patio. The city gave them a hard time about adding that patio because it was construction and not facade. So, in any event, the two council members were the redevelopment committee.
Why only two?
Because any more than two council members would create would make it a council meeting. Three people acting on any committee, three council members acting on any committee would make it an official council meeting. So the two council people that were involved in this project and made all the decisions with regard to granting the funds and etc. and ultimately the oversight of how those funds were spent was Glenn Becerra and Steve Soika. One of the businesses that received $70,000 of taxpayer money, which is a lot more than any of the other businesses, and there were 20-some of them along Tapo Street who got some support through this. But the one business that got the $70,000 is the used car dealership K&J Automotive, who is a strong supporter of Mr. Soika and a good friend of Mr. Becerra. Donated to a couple $1,000s to Soika's campaign, ran some big full-page ads in the newspapers and etc. In any event, a few of us city observers, if you will, were talking some time ago about this and about the kind of a foul odor that was coming from this. And we decided, why let it linger any longer? Let's look into it. So, under my name only, not a Tea Party effort, we put in a request for public records to the city for all of the information with regard to how K&J Automotive, as a tenant, not the landowner, got this $70,000. Two small parcels owned by a trust in the San Fernando Valley. Two owners of the property are both in their 90s. In any event, we decided we'd go ahead and look into this and do some investigation. We did that with the city. We got information with regard to the whole funding process, the rules and regulations regarding what was eligible, what wasn't eligible as far as the project goes. And we also did some investigating with the County of Los Angeles on K&J Automotive's fictitious business filings and licensing in the San Fernando Valley, because they do have a car repossession and auction company over near the Budweiser plant in the valley. So we looked into that. We also looked into Ventura County and to see if K&J Automotive, a sole proprietorship, had filed a fictitious business name with the county, and they had not. After the funds were granted, $70,000, again, $35,000 for two parcels. Now, if you know the property, there was a hot dog stand, sandwich factory, and there was an old abandoned gas station, which was an upholstery shop the last time it was in business. The funding for this specifically prohibited a lot of things that were done. And some things that weren't supposed to be included, like the demolition of that old gas station, was not supposed to be, was not within the categories of what was allowed. It wasn't specifically prohibited. Repaving was specifically prohibited. Interior renovations to the old hot dog stand to make it the sales office was specifically prohibited. So once we got all this together, the three of us, that's the three folks in town here, again, we differ in political positions, we differ in perhaps who we support, and this was not, and I reiterated to the newspaper reporter, this was not against any particular person or council person. This was looking into good government and the fiduciary duties they have with our tax money. Whether you agree or disagree with the whole concept of redevelopment or what have you. So we went ahead with it. We decided that it rose to the level of being beyond cronyism, beyond negligence, to the point where it looked to us to be totally and possibly criminally negligent. So we put together a complaint for the Ventura County Grand Jury. And this is a copy of the complaint and all the backup documents that has been presented to the Ventura County Grand Jury in hopes that they will look at this. Obviously, the press has asked, is this not just another Doug Crosse Tea Party attack on Steve Soika and Glenn Becerra? And all I can reply is, it's not. There are a number of people, again, who have been very much active in being city council watchers that have engaged on this and are involved in it and are willing to continue to look at it and to encourage turning over every stone until we find out exactly what took place. But I want to just go through some of the items on the complaint for your consideration.
Easy back.
$70,000 in community development funds from the city of Simi Valley Tapo Street Fascade Facade Revitalization Committee were approved on a project that does not meet many of the guidelines. Ineligible and unverifiable construction expenses submitted for matching CDA funds, including handwritten receipts only showing the first name and dollar amount. Part of the funding, they were required to use licensed contractors and pay workman's compensation. And in these receipts that the city gladly gave us, there's the labor guys, one day, $75, handwritten on a blank piece of paper. Fraudulent and misrepresentation of contractor license numbers and entities to secure permits for construction using CDA funds. The original general contractor went belly up, turned it over to his brother, who was a general contractor under, the first guy lost his license. The original general contractor went belly up, turned it over to his brother, who was a general contractor under, the first guy lost his license for fraud. The second guy, a brother out of the valley, was restricted from not having employees by the contractor's license board because he had fudged on workers' compensation in his application for contractor's license, said he didn't need workers' compensation because he had no employees. Hiring day laborers not covered by workers' compensation, having no payroll taxes withheld. Fraudulent building application to obtain CDA funds. A serious lack of governmental oversight in making sure CDA criteria and guidelines were being complied with. No government records of meetings, attendance, or minutes of the application approval process. One meeting was held. The two council persons and the former city managers were the only ones that we can verify when we asked who was there on staff or what public persons might have been there. It was held in the city manager's office. The city replied in writing to us that there are no minutes from the meeting, but the only way the funding could have been passed, since there was only two persons on the agency, was that it was a unanimous vote of Becerra and Soika that passed it. CDA funds were used to fund this new upstart business in Simi Valley, whereas all prior CDA projects were used to renovate facades in existing established businesses. Everyone else on Tapo Street was either the landowner or the business owner. This project was a combined two small persons parcel project, each getting $35,000, and the application, the original application, was the only document of several that should have had the landowner's signature on them, but didn't. And when I spoke directly to this 90-year-old woman who's in charge of the trust that owns the property, she specifically denied on 2 occasions that she ever recalled asking for a grant money from the city. She said, if I signed anything, it was given to me as part of the lease negotiation process, and that's what we suspect but can't prove was the case. That it was just something that the real estate agent stuffed under or slid under for her signature. And there were several documents subsequent to the initial application for funding that were supposed to have both the landowner and the tenant signatures on, were only the tenant, Kelly Calor of K&J, signed. The appearance that city council members using political influence to approve a project using CDA funds, and then again there's a lot of supporting documents. Again, the business did not have any status in Ventura County at the time these funds were requested. They didn't have a fictitious business filing, they didn't have a city tax permit, and they didn't have a business in existence. So in essence, it's our contention that the city took this money, which was really designed probably, again, for good intent to clean up and make Tapo Street more attractive to existing businesses. This is the only recipient of some 20 or so that got money that wasn't an existing business already. It really looks and smells, kind of reminds me of the Shakespeare quote. I'll take some questions afterwards. There was an incident where a city electrical inspector was doing an electrical inspection and found that the electrical improvements weren't up to code, and he was specifically told to back off by his supervisor and just ignore it. And the approval of this CDA grant occurred one business day before the new mayor and new council was sworn in. That would have been Mike, Bob. The approval was one day before the old mayor was out, and who did we replace?
Miller.
Miller. We replaced Miller as mayor, and we replaced Foster on council. So that's the whole gist of why, under my name, they say they'll keep it confidential, but I have no interest. I'm a big guy. I have broad shoulders, and I think that it's important as a Tea Party guy. I believe in good government, and I believe in our elected officials have a fiduciary duty to spend our taxpayer monies wisely. And even if you don't agree with the whole concept of redevelopment funds, which obviously Jerry Brown didn't because they're not allowed anymore, he wants the money. And I'm not a big fan of redevelopment agencies, but I think it was well intentioned, intended by the council. And again, it looks like this is just another Tea Party Doug Crosse against Steve Soika. That is not the case. It's just the timing has been such that it took them several weeks to get us all these documents. It took a couple more weeks for us to do the research with the two counties with regard to the existence of the business and etc. But they're, like Shakespeare said, there's something rotten in Denmark. And, again, guys like Scott Santino and Ted Mackel don't get involved in these types of things. My good friend Lewis Gandolfi over there, don't get involved in things like this except for one reason, and that's we want to hold our government accountable. I have some more copies of this grand jury complaint form. I have the entire package that went to the grand jury backing up this complaint, and I have copies of 460s from Soika for City Council 2012, where K&J Auto Exchange donated $2,000 to his current campaign, and thus far has run a couple of full-page ads on his behalf. Both of them say paid for by Kelly Calora. So that's the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes.
In this, when you put this money out, is there anything in this thing that specifically said that you couldn't use the money for new development?
Yes. There was several categories of allowable expenditures, and there were several categories of disallowed expenditures. The one disallowed was paving. Well, when they tore down the old building, they had to repave the parking lot, and they submitted that as part of their paid receipts in order to get their checks from the city. The one gray area is not disallowed and not allowed was a $60,000 demolition of the old gas station building.
Yeah, but specifically what I'm asking though, you're saying that they didn't have a business.
They didn't have a business.
They started a business.
Correct.
So my question is specifically, was that not allowed? Because I understand you're talking about the specifics of paving and trying.
No, the guidelines specifically said it's for existing businesses and landlords. And where there was a landlord-tenant situation, there was supposed to be a series of documents signed by both parties submitted along the process. This was not ever intended to fund startup businesses. Every other business that received money was either an existing business or the owner of the shopping center.
What is their relationship with the owners of the business?
Whose relationship?
The council people.
Yeah, so you can,
Well, all I can tell you is that I don't, I can only tell you what doesn't look real good to me, and that is that they're longtime friends, and that there's $2,000 worth of thank you donations to his campaign.
how much money was involved in the whole redevelopment?
A couple $100,000, I believe. Sure. They got a totally inappropriate percentage of the total fund.
You got almost 50%.
They got 42% of it.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, sir, Mr. Sandell.
Doug, just so I have it figured out, you did an excellent job, by the way. My question is this: the council has to approve any expenditures, so the full council, as I understand, has approved that amount of money could be spent on that project, and then it goes to that 2 council member committee.
Correct.
So that 2 council member committee then reviews the project, and then they decide, is it those 2 people that then decide what they're reimbursing, or is it staff? Who makes that decision?
Just the 2. The ultimate decision is the 2 council people, with direction possibly from the city manager, but in this case, it looks like the direction went the other way. The direction went toward, from the 2 agency members to the city manager through many layers of staff.
So I do know that there's 2 city staff members that took notes, copious notes, during 3 meetings on this project. And yet when you did your Freedom of Information Act, they said there were no minutes.
There were no minutes.
Did they
We
say
asked
no
who was
notes?
who they could verify was in attendance and give us any minutes that were kept of the meeting. The city manager specifically stated in her response letter to me, when she got back to me the same day, that there were no minutes, and the only people that they could confirm were there were the 2 council persons and Mike Siddell, the former city manager.
And on the reimbursement policy, is it policy, is it guidelines, or is it law, what they can and can't reimburse on?
The policy and some things are covered under state law. With regard to CDA funding from a state level, they have to use licensed contractors. They have to pay prevailing wages. That wasn't done in this case. They didn't pay prevailing wages. It almost looks, and if you go through and you're happy to, pleased to have you look at it, you go through this 2-inch stack picture of a piece, it almost looks like they took a paper bag and dumped them on the city manager's desk and said, write me a check. I mean, some of them are just so bogus. Like I said, the labor guys won one day, $75. Multitudes of cash receipts and copies of a check written instead of providing a receipt. It just goes beyond the possibility of negligence. It truly, it just can't be ineptness and negligence. It has to be contrived.
From the evidence, that sounds like it's more criminal than negligence.
Well, that's up to the grand jury to decide whether they even take it up. They have an acknowledged receipt of it.
Yeah.
And, what'll happen is the grand jury will make a decision. They can pass it on to an investigating agency, probably not the police, but the sheriff's department. And then the attorney general can get involved and the state agencies can get involved. It's up to them to decide to what depth this may be simple lousy government and negligence, not criminal or criminal. Yes,
Since
sir.
there were no government records or meetings, attendance, or minutes of the application, will this be a violation of the Brown Act?
You know, I don't know. The agenda said it was an open meeting and a noticed meeting. However, again, no minutes according to the
Are
city.
these required? I can ask.
You know, I'm not an attorney, so I find it strange that any public meeting of elected officials that's dealing and handing out money
Noticed, yeah.
and that had been publicly noticed and said it was open to the public to attend, wouldn't have a record of who was there, other than who had to have been there? Yes, sir.
How much of this 70,000 was it, did you find accounted for in the records?
Well, it's all accounted for if you believe the receipts.
Okay.
But, you know, there was another area that was specifically prohibited as an expenditure, that's any interior modifications. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that was for interior painting, fixing up the inside of that old hot dog
They are
stand.
not facade.
So,
It was definitely not
so
facade.
for all we know, then some of that money could have gone directly to the owners and just kept and not spent when it was supposed to have been spent.
You know, who knows? Again, a paper bag full of receipts. You know, and I didn't look at every single one of them, but there could be some in there for fertilizer, as far as I know, for the guys' front lawn.
Without the records, that would be bogus, right?
You know, it's just well beyond, and it's emitting a tremendous odor. And that's why we looked into it. And again, it wasn't, and I can repeat this till I'm blue in the face, but a lot of people, because I'm the target du jour, who's been going after Steve Soika since the beginning of the election, you know, that I'm just after him and Becerra, who are connected at the hip. And that's not the case. Truly, it's all about what I said it was about. And the timing is simply coincidental. This would have come out 3 or 4 months ago if the city hadn't drug its feet so long. But on the city's, to the city's credit, they gave me things that I didn't ask for that almost led me to believe they were priming the pump for us to kind of look at things that we might not have looked at, like a lot of the receipts. As they did with when we looked at Soika's cell phone reimbursement situation, they gave me a copy of the city's administrative code that I didn't ask for. That specifically said it wasn't for, it was for personal cell phone use. And of course, Mike gets twice that amount. When we asked Mike and Bob Huber about getting money from the city for their cell phone, they said, "We can?" Really? But you know, when you call up the cell phone of a city councilman and it answers, "Hi, you've reached Money Mailer," you kind of question whether city business is appropriate to direct toward that telephone. Yes?
What is specifically the Brown Act? I don't remember. Something about it.
It's the people don't surrender the sovereignty to the agencies which serve them, and the people, in retaining their sovereignty, basically demand to know what's the government.
No, but in English, it is, you either have to have a quorum or something.
Right.
Yeah, there has to be, every bit of information has to be disclosed to people.
And there
So
has
you
to be-
can't have
And a
private
closed
meetings.
door meeting.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Governmental agency can't have closed-door meetings. If there were 3 city council people here tonight, it could be a violation of the Brown Act that they talk about, especially if they talk about any city business. That's why only 2 members of the council act as an agency like this, because otherwise it would be a city council.
Because of the Brown Act.
So it has to be 3 to be a violation of the Brown Act?
It has to be a majority of the board. If you have a 7-member board, it would have to be 4.
So if 4 or more met in private, that's a violation of the Brown
So
Act.
they avoided the Brown
If
Act.
3 or less, it's not.
Let's
a-
talk
Not
about
necessarily,
that.
not necessarily.
No, because this is a separate ordained agency.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's consisted of only 2 people.
Haven't traded consent.
Eric, you have another question?
Yeah, I have a question
Oh, yeah,
too
because
about,
of the
it's more what I'm gonna allude to is that not only that this whole thing looks like it could be a criminal, but to the point where it also comes into bribery. I give you this cash, you go for my campaigns. And that's what has happened. So I want to know, out of that 70 grand, how much of our own tax money has gone toward back to their kickback for a campaign. And I think, it's ridiculous.
Well, as much as I would tend to agree with you that it smells a little bit, that's not something we can prove by virtue of the documents we have. And I have to only stand on that which we have diligently put together to present to the grand jury. And again, I'll pass these around. If anybody wants more information about what we presented, and again, all the backup documentation. And this isn't all of it. The stack of documents I got from the city was twice this number of pages, and it ended up costing me almost $90 for copy fees in the city under the public information.
Now, can we find out if KJ was paid by a check or just all in $100 bills?
No, the city will have records as to how he was paid. And again, this is matching funds, okay? It wasn't just that he was handed $70,000. He had to show $70,000 in receipts that he paid for out of his pocket to get reimbursed for half of it. Okay, there's matching funds.
There's two of them there.
I've never heard of any fronting money like
There's one right there. You
Just, I don't know much about this stuff, but I would say, fronting money, I mean, which money?
They gotta show receipts.
I know, but who's gonna go on an individual basis? Fronting 70,000?
I can only tell you that just thumbing through the receipts, you'll see a lot of stuff that's really questionable. Yes.
Was it really, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
was it really the council member's responsibility to be checking those receipts? I mean, were they supposed to be looking at all that in detail, or was somebody else supposed to be looking at that for them?
Obviously, staff would review the receipts, and the city manager would approve the payments. And if you're asking, could it possibly been simply an inept staffer that approved this? The answer that I would conclude from looking at these is if someone did do that, they were probably told, does it add up to 70,000? Then don't question it. Because we do have a city building inspector who's willing to testify that he was told to back off on the electrical inspection, which was under code. Yes, sir.
I'm not clear on this, so correct me
I don't
if
think
I'm
Doug
wrong,
can see
but I
it.
believe I understand
Doug wants to answer my question.
that if a politician receives campaign funds and does not spend all of them in a campaign, that he can then keep the remainder and put it in his pocket. Is that correct?
I don't believe that's true. I think they have to keep it in a campaign account for future campaign use or return it to the donors. You know, Louis, have you ever acted as a
They
treasurer?
can't convert it.
They can't convert it to personal funds, I know that. But they can retain it for next election. Ever acted as a treasurer?
They can't convert it.
They can't convert it to personal funds, I know that. But they can retain it for next election, what have you. Yes, sir.
He says a really interesting question. I'm curious now. Talking about the ethics of the people handling it. When they approve a project like this, they're approving specific things. I mean, they're saying, I'm going to do this. So basically, they have to say, we're going to pave, we're going to do this, or do they just simply say, we're going to?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Because he'd be a really good point. If they didn't know what they were going to do with the money, how do you prove that they knew?
Well, it's not that you have to prove that they knew or didn't know. The fact of the matter is that a lot of the work that was done weren't within the guidelines of what was supposed to be funded. Now, and that's the whole gist of our complaint. Somebody, at some level, should have questioned this stuff. And if they did, they were either told to ignore it in fear for losing their job or being demoted at work or something. I don't know. That's only conjecture. All I know is what's here and what's demonstrable in a court of law as far as I'm concerned.
You have your hand up?
No.
Doug,
Yes, sir.
so we don't know, the demolition was 60 grand. You got a total of 70. So we don't know if demo was excluded or not. So it could be 70 grand or 10 grand we're talking about.
Well,
That violated the law.
again, demolition of an existing building wasn't something that was part of the guidelines.
That's not a facade.
But it's certainly not a facade.
So we don't know, in other words. We
Well,
don't,
we do
it's
know
not,
that it shouldn't have been part of this project. That would have
and
cost money.
paving for sidewalks was included.
Paving the parking area, paving where the cars now sit, where the old gas station was specifically not within the guidelines.
But the 40 grand spent for the sidewalks, wait a minute. 40 grand for the sidewalks is allowed.
No, there was no,
Yeah, there
It's
are.
not a facade.
Well, it's allowed, it's part
Based
of it.
upon what the guidelines are,
said it wasn't.
that service station should have never been demolished. They just should have fixed the front of it.
Well, Doug said we don't know. Is in the gray area is what he said.
No, they could have demolished it, that's in their permit, but should they have been reimbursed with taxpayer dollars for the demolition, is what Doug's saying. That wasn't
that's
permitted.
right, no.
And you said that was in the gray
They're
area, so I'm
allowed to
asking you.
demolish the building, but the taxpayers shouldn't have paid half of the cost.
I understand they can demolish the building, but you said it was in the gray area if it should have been covered or not.
But I said it wasn't specifically it was not specifically disallowed. They had specific things that were allowed, specific things that were not allowed, such as interior improvements, repaving, and things like that. Planters and landscaping, those types of things, and irrigation system were. Replumbing the building, redoing the interior, painting the interior, remodeling the interior, new electrical system for the interior, that shouldn't have been allowed.
Okay. And then all the money is all from this year that's gone to campaigns, correct? Not back when this was...
I don't have records from prior campaigns.
I have it right here, it's on. All the ones you showed are from this year, right?
Correct.
So we're talking 2 years later. You called it a
Could have been
payoff.
4 years.
Called it payoff.
Could have
But
been, they could have donated in 2008 when Steve was running for re-election, or 2010 when he ran for mayor.
Sure.
But we do know that he's donated.
He has now, yes.
Big time this
But
year.
not when this was going on.
Possibly, possibly not. I don't have that information. I can't comment on it.
Okay.
Again, I can only talk about what we have.
Well, there was no donations in 09 or 10.
There wasn't?
There was none.
Okay.
You know, on this here, one thing I want to point out that when a person has a guilty conscience of doing a bad act, there are times that they will show in certain ways. And the guy who owns the car, who's of the old car lot, like Kelly, he kept himself in the papers and the news, always attacking people. And I wonder why that he was at the council meetings, he was so on Soika, he would jump up to defend him, don't talk about that man this way. And you're like, what's going on here? I mean, he's a older man, a grown man, but he's jumping around like if he's a puppet on some strings. And now when you find out that you start the process of what's going on with the business and how it got started, you can understand why he's going to be always mad. He's done a unethical move that no one really knows about, and he's upset. That's why he's always attacking. I mean, this man in a paper personally attacked me. I didn't know who he was. I thought it was a girl, like a woman. I even went to the council meeting and said, this woman who's attacking me. And then after the council meeting, after I got done saying this, Doug tells me it's a man. I'm like, oh, it's not. So, I mean,
by the way, those of you who don't know, this is Eric Allaby. He's also a candidate for city council. well-intentioned observer and calls them on the carpet on a regular basis. The council, certain council members don't really care for either of us. But you know what? Like I said, I have big shoulders. I hope that this gets the press it deserves. And again, whether it unelects an incumbent or not is not my main concern. My main concern is that this should absolutely be picked up by the grand jury. It should be investigated. And if there are other agencies and activities in the city that are as loosely controlled and run, and this serves to tighten up the ship.
But Sarah is alphabetically, so it's easier.
It's a good thing. It's all about, you know, what Louis said when we were on the fiscal advisory committee was if we can't rein in government in a small, conservative, well-run community like Simi Valley, we can't do it anywhere. And we're in big trouble if we can't, because we'll never rein in government if we can't do it at the local level.
I found it fascinating that the city manager resigned, so because he was credit for the
Well, no, that was purely coincidental.
Yeah.
It really was. Yes, Lou?
Doug, just so I'm not confused, this election cycle, Kelly, the owner of that used car lot, has given, between his wife, himself, and his business, $3,000 to the Soiga campaign, $3,000 to the Shannon campaign, and he's run about $3,500 in ads in the newspapers for business, $3,000 to the Soiga campaign, $3,000 to the Shannon campaign, and he's run about $3,500 in ads in the newspapers for Soiga and Shannon.
Correct.
So he's given about $10,000 to the two of them already this election cycle. The last election cycle, in the mayor's race, he ran ads that he paid himself in the newspaper that don't show on the campaign filings. And at the same time as this money, this $70,000 was given to him from the city, he also was appointed by Steve Soika to the City Council's Ad Hoc Fiscal Advisory Committee that was chartered with recommending to the City Council on how to deal with its financial issues. At the same exact time, with no 2-year lag time, that he ran ads for Soika in the mayor's race, and that he got the $70,000 from the city. So he's been a player, a monetary player, and appointed by Steve to an important board at the same time this was going on.
Absolutely. And the curious thing was, and Louis can verify this, we vote on something or make a recommendation, and Clark could go along with it, and then after getting a chance to talk to Soika or Rosera, he'd come back the next meeting and change his mind.
This election, it's, unless I missed one, it's 3K to Tim and 2K
to chastise anybody, but it seems to me this kind of business.
unless I missed it, but I did not see it. I believe, to Steve was his wife and the business, nothing from Kelly.
His motivation was that. Let's just let the grand jury handle it. My motivation for coming here was basically because of the Tea Party affiliation, and particularly the national elections that we have coming up here. And I've attended several meetings now. I've never once heard anybody in this room talk about the national election coming up, which I think is important as what you're talking about is. I really believe the future of the country is at stake. This is going to be a very, very narrow election.
The watershed election.
And I would like to see people maybe volunteering to try and get some voters out. Although California is probably a lost cause because we always vote for the Democrats. But
Except in Ventura County.
54 years, by the way, we voted Democrats.
With all due respect, we spent our last 3 meetings doing nothing but talking about the elections from the national level on down. We've done a voter's guide. We had a 13-member nomination committee. We interviewed all the candidates that would come to talk to us. We discussed at length and vetted all the candidates. We came very narrowly to a decision on president. We met with Buck McKeon. 2 of us met with Buck McKeon, and because of his good government stance and his crony capitalism as it comes to defense contracting, we gave him a no confidence vote. So we didn't fall in line with everything. People here are very much involved in activities. There are a number of people that are involved in what's called swing state telephone calling, where we can have an effect. And you're absolutely right. Obama's going to carry California, and Obama's going to carry New York. So if you want to impact anything, it's at the congressional level. And we've got people here that are working for Tony Strickland. We've got people here that are working for our next assembly person, Scott Wilk. And we have spent a lot of time on this. This is just a new topic. We've kind of finished up our formal involvement in the electoral process, but we did spend 3 meetings and a number of communications on elections. But I think this group has come to realize what most Tea Party groups have come to realize, and that's the impact you can have in government is most efficiently directed at the local level and work your way on up. By getting involved in committees, by serving on campaigns, by being an observer, as I call myself a council observer because I go to the meetings or I watch them, I question them, like Eric does, like Lewis does, and we call them on the carpet when we see something not going the way it should. And the basic principle of the Tea Party mission is good governance. That's really what we're all about. And this is just one example that has come up of anything but good governance in our opinion.
See, our problem has been, I think, at the national level, is that we've had a very ineffective Congress, burdened by the fact that there's really no presidential leadership. And this Congress has allowed him to get around the law, so to speak, with all of these executive orders that he's issued. And I don't hear anyone really standing up to him and challenging him.
Well,
the Republican leadership seems to be sort of like, gee, nothing I can do about it.
They become adversarial instead of trying to solve the problem. We took a strong position, as did several Libertarian and Tea Party groups, against NDAA. And the tweak to that, which allows us to be, anybody that disagrees with government, to be tagged as a terrorist and thrown into Gitmo without the right to habeas corpus. We stood up strongly for that. But we are such a small percentage of the voting public, but we're growing. You know, I just spent 3 weeks back east, and driving through New York State, I was just astounded by the number of Republican signs for local office on up to president, and one that I almost stopped and asked him where he got it because I wanted one on my front lawn. Wasn't Romney Ryan. It was Americans versus Obama, and I wanted one of those signs. But driving through Ohio and driving through some of these so-called swing states, twice as many signs for what may be considered our side as opposed to the other. And people are concentrating on electing, quote, Tea Party candidates. And our biggest challenge is to take more seats in the Congress and hopefully capture the Senate. And if that happens, it really doesn't matter who's president. It really doesn't. The economy's always been better when we've had a Republican president and a Democratic Congress or vice versa. Always. In the history of the United States, always been better.
Reagan? That's a good example of that.
Reagan was a good example of that. And Carter was even a good example in his second term when he started to reach across the aisle and get things done. Because he would deal with the Republicans.
I have to agree with this man right here, that when you have a Congress that won't stand up and you have a president that can run the country with executive orders, Congress is worthless.
Absolutely.
Absolutely doesn't matter at all.
And I gotta tell you that I get emails and letters every day. When I got back from a 3-week vacation, I had 830 some odd emails. The majority of them are people wanting to tell Congress to get off your duff and start holding President accountable and not allowing this to happen. But they haven't stood up.
Don't be so concerned about getting reelected. Do the right thing, stand up for principle.
But they haven't stood up.
Don't be so concerned about getting reelected. Do the right thing, stand up for principle, and if you lose your pension, that's too bad.
That's right.
It's a matter of principle that we don't have enough people in Congress who are willing to take that kind of a stand. And we ought to look to elect people that are willing to do that.
So we dream about every night, right?
Yeah.
So at this point, let me just wrap this up on the topic of discussion. We can then just have a little social hour. We're hoping that a couple of council people will take this as a serious issue and hopefully advocate for looking into it. I know it's going to be in the Ventura County Star because the reporter was already here earlier today interviewing them. Of course, the Simi Valley Nut isn't covering it because they have a slobbering and they don't see it as news because it's coming from Doug.
I caught it.
But just to wrap this up, we're hoping that we're going to make a verbal presentation at the next council meeting, which I believe is the 29th, in little 3-minute sound bites of a couple people of diverse interest and background speaking to the issue to continue to keep it highlighted and press for the grand jury to actually take this up. They have acknowledged receipt, but they have not. They'll need some time to decide whether or not to proceed on it. Now, the grand jury looked into the delay on the sewer system on First Street here, so you'd think that this might be something of interest.
Yeah, that's the timeline.
And the grand jury is a citizen. Before the election, nothing's going to happen with the grand jury. But what will happen is if we can highlight this enough to make it public information and get enough folks interested in it to push for it and perhaps give a second thought to who they might vote for. The rest of the council, again, I'll reiterate, the rest of the council had nothing but good intention in setting forth this CDA. Barbara, felt she was doing the right thing. The rest of the council probably felt they were doing the right thing too. Now, I can't disagree with that because anything that the city can do to help business, as long as it's not done this way, is okay by me.
Well, one thing I've always heard about public servants is that they love to do those type things with other people's taxes. You know what I mean? It's like these like you said, but it's true. And it's that old thing I've always heard that the good attention pays the road to hell or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where we're at now. You know what I mean? So.
Again, and you know what? I don't know. I've said what I can say based on what I know is fact. So if this group wants, and this was a question, again, this was me, as an individual in concert with a couple other city observers moving forward on this, if this group feels like it's something that they want to ordain officially as a Tea Party issue, that would be fine, as we did with council benefits, as we did with cell phone bills and etc. I'll leave that up to you. I don't need it. I'll carry the ball. I've got broad shoulders, but I would like individual support with regard to keeping the spotlight shown on this.
I have a question about Soika's rebuttal to the Tea Party.
White paper?
Yeah.
Our little white paper?
Yeah, in the statement.
Well, and there will be a letter. Obviously, we didn't have the money to throw a big ad like the councilman did. We were scraping to put the little white paper in there that we did. I did write a letter. It will be in this Friday's Acorn. And basically what it says is, Soika spent a lot of money on an ad but didn't refute a single thing we said. He didn't refute the fact that he's the only council person that takes every single benefit he's allowed to take. That he received $7,500 in cell phone, that he's paid $30 times 2 each month to attend community development meetings, that he bills the city 51 cents a mile for any time he drives beyond the city borders. He didn't refute any of that. So what I said is he again justified his existence as a council person because of the wonderful things he does. And
look how little I make, and he circles his
we have thrown back the curtain on the wizard here and revealed him to be exactly what he is. He didn't refute anything we enumerated in that white paper. And in fact, the pay stub was from January. So it didn't show the year-to-date numbers. And that was intentional. But what it did show is that he's making $1,100 or $1,200 every week, or every 2 weeks, which is $50,600 a year. So he didn't refute a thing we said.
No, just a big ad with a bunch of numbers on it.
Exactly. And then he listed all these activities that he has participated in, one of which was this redevelopment agency, several of which no longer exist, and the rest of them either meet monthly or very infrequently, like the Arrow Task Force or whatever. You know, yeah, you're on it, but how much time does it really take for you to do that? And to list an agency like this one that doesn't even exist anymore and only met a couple of times, 3 or 4 times, you know, how can you justify, you know, as opposed to what you've really accomplished? There are other candidates that are running, and they're running on a record, a solid record of actually doing things. And there are candidates that we didn't endorse that are doing that. So, you know.
Down here, Doug.
Yes, Lou.
Well, Doug, back to your issue, I think, you know, the redevelopment agency could have spent 100 times that much money if they wanted to on a project they were trying to bring to the city in certain areas of the city. So it's not a question of did they have a legal right to spend money through a redevelopment agency. But that particular project followed different guidelines. There were different set of rules for that facade program that the city council set up, and those rules were not followed. The reimbursement as set forth by the rules were not followed, and even some state laws may not have been adhered to. So it's not a matter of if we think the used car lot should have gone there rather than go where the auto dealers are on First Street. The issue is, did those 2 council members and the city
Candidates that we didn't endorse that are doing that. So, you know.
Down here, Doug.
Yes, Lou.
Well, Doug, back to your issue, I think, you know, the redevelopment agency could have spent 100 times that much money if they wanted to on a project they were trying to bring to the city in certain areas of the city. So it's not a question of did they have a legal right to spend money through a redevelopment agency. But that particular project followed different guidelines. There were different set of rules for that facade program that the city council set up, and those rules were not followed. The reimbursement as set forth by the rules were not followed, and even some state laws may not have been adhered to. So it's not a matter of if we think the used car lot should have gone there rather than go where the auto dealers are on First Street. The issue is, did those 2 council members and the city staff violate council policy, council rules on what the facade money could be used for within that district, and were any state laws broken? And I hope, because you've done such a good, thorough job, that your organization will pass some resolution that they ask you to go forward Monday night and move forward with this thing and bring it from a Doug Crosse thing to an organizational thing.
Well, I appreciate that comment and that clarification because you're exactly right. I mean, the city can justifiably do a lot of things to attract business and revitalize this community, and they should. And we've already talked about things like, even though it's not a lot of money, doing away with the business tax, and doing a stellar job of marketing this community as being business friendly. And doing away with the business tax is a minor amount of money, but it shouts, we're business friendly, and we want you here. We want the job you create. Yes, sir.
Okay, I make a motion for this Tea Party to move on to the council policy as well.
Ordain this effort, moved and seconded. I guess we'll call for the question. Should we take this on as a Tea Party endeavor?
I have one question.
Yes. I'm going to do it anyway.
I have one question before you move on.
Yes.
Mark.
Discussion.
Lewis.
Please do.
But,
You know, it
what I really need to point out.
was funny. It was a couple. I don't know. It was like a
This
couple
is really
months ago.
important.
When you
And for the Tea Party to be behind it,
signs on the otter,
in the
otter,
future,
what is it?
I
The
think
next day they were down or something like that. Yeah, I was like, yeah, you think it worked.
But they want to make them all
Because for us
legal
to throw
now.
our support behind it
Yeah, you can't
completely
do
after
it.
the
You know,
fact,
because
for some maybe hard.
I feel like the way you feel during
You
your,
personally have no problem with it.
you know,
But I
where like,
think for us,
let's say,
you know, you're gonna-
a Christmas special,
you talked
that's
about-
okay, you know, tractors, but
you know, the other.
Memorial Day, Labor Day sales, go crazy.
You got our support, then you went forward.
I totally agree. That's a
Toyota's been having a tent sale going on for about a month now.
You also remember that I already had the documentation
work
from the
there,
city.
and I remember like Jim's a good guy, but they're all.
I didn't
Their
want
look plan was to
come
go more to the
this
top
group
constantly, you know,
with just,
got the, got the drums constantly in the same area.
I wanted to have something that you guys could look at and see that was, had some strength and some power behind it before. And again, I would like to see it as one of our campaign issues, but I don't have to have it. It would possibly, as Louis alluded, add more strength. But irrespective, I can tell you, irrespective of whether or not you vote to make this an issue for our group, it's still going to be looked at as Doug Crosse attacking Steve Soikas.
I think that's my point I'm trying to make. I want these things to come from the Tea Party and not you, because
Left it away from you.
I hate the thought that somebody says, we're not gonna do this because this is Doug Crosse's personal vendetta. And had it been from the Tea Party, all of us, then we wouldn't have to worry about it.
Well, this is,
And I just want to be able to back it 100%. To give you all the strength and power of the organization.
I appreciate that, but again, I couldn't.
I
The
understand.
timing was such that we had to, we wanted to get it to the grand jury in an expeditious fashion as soon as we had the documentation put together and tagged and categorized and accepted. And the other thing was that I didn't want to come to you without all the facts and backed up information.
I think he's made a good point. If there's no other discussion, I think you ought to call for the question.
I will do that, Mr. Vice President.
You vice president?
No, he's treasurer. He's treasurer.
I don't know what I am.
He's something, but he's
I don't know what I am. Assistant to the
got,
vice
he's
president.
got a
I tried to
title.
bring that up
You're the vice
for-
president.
Mostly for future.
If I die, it's all on your shoulders.
No, I understand.
Yes, sir.
At
Like
the,
putting Biden in charge
at the
of
next
Obama.
council meeting, we'll bring it up.
Well, let's coordinate that effort. We'll probably have 3 or 4 speakers. Gary's also volunteered. And we'll just speak, we'll basically just do exactly what I just did. I'm going to give a little sneaky introduction and overview. And I'll tell you how I'm going to start it. I'm going to start it with commenting on Becerra's chastising hell up here for even questioning the fact that having a friendship with a council person could lead to a conflict of interest, and how the congressman once referred to Glenn Becerra as his adopted son, and well, if Becerra is Gallagher's adopted son, then Kelly Caloric is La Familia, Soika's little brother. That's the way I. So I'll call for the question. Tea Party endeavor. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Other than me. All right, guys. Let's just kibitz and enjoy. And
I want to
as I did visit Chicago for a couple of days, vote early and often. Yes. Yes. Hold on 1 second.
Guys, I don't try, can somebody give me a ride to home? I live very close by.